Today for First Church Guilford, Connecticut, we are recording out in our garden. So the winds may come and blow some things around, but that's fall and we're very excited to be outside still. Our guest preacher this morning is Milton Brasher-Cunningham, and the lectionary text for today is from Exodus chapter 33. Hear now these words. Moses said to the Lord, "See, you have said to me, bring up these people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. You have said, I know you by name, and you have also found favor in my sight. Now, if I have found favor in your sight, show me your ways, so that I may know I have found favor. Consider too that this nation is your people." God said, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." And Moses replied, "If your presence will not go, do not carry us up from here. For how shall it be known that I have found favor in your sight, and I am your people, unless you go with us? In this way we shall be distinct, and I am your people from every nation on the face of the earth." And then the Lord said to Moses, "I will do the very thing that you have asked, for you have found favor in my sight, and I know you by name." Moses said, "Show me your glory, I pray." And God said, "I will make all my goodness pass before you, and will proclaim before your name, I am the Lord. And I will be gracious to whom I am gracious, and will show mercy on whom I will show mercy. But you cannot see my face, for no one shall see me and live." The Lord continued, "See, there is a place by me where you shall stand on this rock. And while my glory passes, I will put in a cleft on the rock, and I will cover with my hand as I pass by. And then I will take away my hand, and you will see my back, but my face shall not be seen." May God grant us wisdom and understanding to this passage and this sermon as it is preached out in nature. Amen.
Back in the days of Blockbuster video and VHS tapes, Ginger and our friend Cherry rented the movie Casino. It was so long that it took up 2 tapes. So they popped one in the VCR, you remember what those were, and were a little puzzled that the movie just started without any titles or credits, but they chalked it up to Martin Scorsese being a creative director. Still, some things didn't make sense. When they got to the end of the tape and the final credits began to roll, they realized that they'd started in the middle of the movie. Our lectionary passage this morning is the beginning of the second tape, if you will, as far as the story of the Hebrew people goes. It will make more sense if we give it a larger context. The book of Exodus is telling the story of how the Hebrews became a people, a nation, a community of faith. It's also the story of their learning to live in relationship to God in new ways. It began with their exodus from Egypt, and then they wandered in the wilderness of the Sinai Peninsula for 40 years. In one of the early chapters of this story, the people complained because they didn't have enough to eat. No, they didn't just complain, they whined. "Why did God bring us out here to die? We were better off back in Egypt, blah, 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 blah." In response, God rained bread every morning like dew. Manna, they called it, which in Hebrew actually means, what is this? And it also inspired our hymn for today. "Morning by morning, new mercies I see." In the evening, quail flew into the camp and just sat there. Though this part of the story is told only once, the food supply chain was never broken. I want you to remember that the meals didn't stop for 40 years. Hang on to that detail. There's one more piece of the prelude. The chapter of the story we're reading today begins with Moses going up the mountain to to get the 10 Commandments. He was gone so long that the people began to think he wasn't coming back, and they got anxious. Their pleading with Aaron to do something makes me think of the line from the chorus of John Prine's Angel from Montgomery. Just give me one thing that I can hold on to. So Aaron had them bring all of their jewelry, and they melted it all down, and they built a golden calf to give them that one thing, something they could see and touch, a God they could grasp. Moses came down the mountain with the tablets, saw the calf, got mad, threw the tablets on the ground and broke them, and then built a fire so hot that he burned the calf to ashes. He didn't just melt the gold. He burned it to ashes, mixed the ashes in the water, and made the people swallow the consequences of their behavior. Moses was mad, God was mad, the people were distraught. The Hebrew people were, as I said, in the process of becoming a people. They had spent generations in Egypt being defined by who they were not. And as they physically wandered in the Sinai, they were spiritually wandering as well, trying to figure out exactly who they were. To see themselves as God's people meant they had to come to terms with God. For all the parted seas and giant gestures of deliverance, the Hebrews lived with a basic insecurity that God was not going to hang around. They wanted constant reassurance. They wanted a God they could touch, a God they could understand. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks says, "We now understand the entire drama set in motion by the making of the golden calf. Moses pleaded with God to come closer to the people so they would encounter God not only at unrepeatable moments in the form of miracles, but regularly on a daily basis, and not only as a force that threatens to obliterate all it touches, but as a presence that could be sensed in the heart of the camp." In the aftermath of the golden calf, Moses pitched his tent outside the camp. Both he and God kept their distance from the people, who wanted their presence most of all, but didn't know how to ask for it. From the camp, they could see God come to Moses to visit in the form of a pillar of cloud that sat between the camp and the tent. And they could see that Moses and God were in conversation in a way the people had not experienced. So it gave the appearance of two old friends talking. Now Moses was a man acquainted with powerful revelation. God first spoke to him through a burning bush that never burned up. When Moses raised his arms, the sea parted and the people escaped from Egypt. The Torah records more than one conversation between God and Moses where Moses bargains with God. And in this passage, Moses asked to see God face to face. And God says, "See, there is a place by me where you shall stand on the rock, and while my glory passes, I will put you in a cleft of the rock, and I will cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I'll take away my hand, and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen." Now, I want to go back to the detail I asked you to hold on to earlier. The manna and the quail that didn't stop for 40 years. Morning by morning, God had showed up, and the new mercies had continued, but Moses and the Hebrew people somehow lost sight of them. The Hebrews wandered for 40 years across an area about the size of the state of Maine. When they left Egypt, they thought, I'm sure, that everything was going to be okay. They were freed from their enslavement. God was with them. It was a new beginning. What they thought, though, would end quickly, then dragged on for generations. They didn't know when it was going to end. They didn't know what to expect. They built the calf so that they could have a God, as we said, that they could grasp. They wanted a quantifiable life and a quantifiable God. They wanted certainty. Or they wanted another grand gesture on God's part to give them a sense of presence. And what they got was breakfast every morning. In one of my favorite movies, Miss Firecracker, Carnell Scott is a woman who is well acquainted with grief and tragedy and who was also in the last year of her eligibility for the Miss Firecracker contest in Yazoo City, Mississippi. Her cousin Elaine had won it years before when Carnell was a child, and Carnell was sure she could do the same and that winning that title would change everything. She came in 5th. Later, she says to Max Sam, the come and go love of her life and also her biggest encourager, I just want to know what I can reasonably expect out of life. Not much, he answers, laughing and coughing at the same time. But she persists and says, but something. And his answer is 2 words: eternal grace. We are wandering into the 8th month of distance and isolation connected to COVID. In many ways, we're less sure about when this will be over than ever. We are a little over 2 weeks away from an election that will answer some questions but leave much of our cultural turmoil and division still at play. We are struggling to deepen and widen our understanding of what it means to be a people as we try and come to terms with the structural racism and bigotry baked into our systems. We too want some certainty about what's coming next. We too pin our hopes too easily on grand gestures. We too want to know what we can reasonably expect out of life. But like the Hebrew people, we will find our hope and our humanity in the small mercies. We find our faith in the stories we tell that give us a sense of God's enduring presence, not in a full-on, in-your-face kind of way, but in how we remember what God has done in our midst when we see God's back. The cliche says that the devil is in the detail. No, that's where God is. Micah 6:8 is a verse we quote often. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God? The oldest translations read, love mercy instead of love kindness. The manna on the ground each day was an offering of God's kindness. With that in mind, listen to Naomi Shihab Nye's poem, Kindness. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go. So you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride thinking the bus will never stop, the passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you. How he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the threads of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, it is you I've been looking for. And then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or friend. In the musical Godspell, one of the characters sings to Jesus, day by day, "Oh dear Lord, 3 things I pray. To see thee more clearly, to love thee more dearly, and to follow thee more nearly, day by day." In the messy details of our lives, in our hunger for assurance, in our trust that we are held by eternal grace, and in all that is uncertain about what lies ahead, our daily kindnesses are the best reminder of God's presence and of our connectedness. Morning by morning, evening by evening, sorrow by sorrow, new mercies, new kindnesses we see, day by day by day by day by day. Amen.